Listen up. The world is not blind. They sensed it from the minute you came in. The change in energy, the weight of your presence, the unsaid power you exude. It is obvious. You do not need to show your strength since it is already understood. Chosen one. Simply seeing you is enough for them. They detect something unusual about you. Something they couldn't quite identify but couldn't ignore. That is the type of power you possess. Not in loud affirmations, not in meaningless words, but in your very being. You do not need to participate in their noise. Your quiet speaks louder than their words. They feel nervous and scramble for control. They never did in the first place. They expected you to respond, explain, and defend. But you accomplished something they never expected. You stood still, and in the silence, the reality became plain. They required your energy, approval, and attention. But you've never required them. It is time for you to rise. Instead of fighting needless fights, walk in the strength of quiet. Not everyone should have access to your thoughts, emotions, or energies. And when you understand that fact and quit playing their game, you change the whole script. You are the force. They cannot forecast the presence. They can't hide their inability to tolerate stillness. And it is true power. There is a certain force in the gap between words. A silent power that disturbs people who depend on loudness to establish authority. Silence is not nothingness. It is a finely tuned awareness. It removes the veil of delusion, forcing others to see the stark mirror of their own character. In quiet, there is no room for pretense, no disguise to conceal objectives. When you refuse to interact, you become a mirror in which people may see the reality. They want to flee. Consider a hurricane launched with the intent of destroying, only to be confronted with an immovable mountain. The quiet, that reluctance to be pulled into response, exposes the storm for what it is. Chaos, seeking validation. When manipulation fails to establish a footing, it falls under its own weight. The unsaid may often be louder than the loudest declaration. It disarms, exposes, and unsettles in ways that no words could. Absence of response does not indicate weakness. Rather, it is an assertion of authority. It forces the restless minds around you to face their own ideas, to wander through the echoes of their own words. When there is no retaliation to hold on to, no resistance to push against, they are left struggling with themselves. The weight of their own acts, which were before drowned out by distraction, now looms huge. Silence maintained with purpose is not an empty emptiness. It is a pulse, an invisible current that alters the atmosphere. History has long acknowledged the power of silence, the weight of a pause, the seriousness of restraint, and how a response may be distorted, misinterpreted, or diminished. But the absence persists. It prompts contemplation. It makes people question what it means, why it hurts, and what they've really disclosed about themselves. Some try to provoke in the hopes of gaining energy from confrontation, but when they get nothing in return, their hostility collapses under its own weight. The prospect of a reply motivates them. The lack of one causes them to starve. Silence does not constitute capitulation. It is a vow that you will not be influenced by external pressures. Words might be misunderstood, but an unflinching silence remains impenetrable. It speaks without distortion, signifying that the turmoil of others has no hold over you. Those who depend on disagreement to legitimize their inner anguish get bewildered when denied a struggle. Their efforts to destabilize you simply highlight their own instability. Standing steady and quiet means refusing the invitation to chaos, to be the immovable force that causes turbulence to collapse from its own weight. The Lord will fight for you. You merely need to remain motionless. Exodus 1414. Imagine standing on the brink of a raging sea, waves smashing, winds howling, and every power in the universe attempting to drag you under. But instead of battling the river, you remain strong, unshaken, and unaffected. The storm will not shatter you. It demonstrates your strength. That is the power of quiet. That is the power of quiet. A mind strengthened by intelligence does not fail in the face of adversity. It does not falter when the world attempts to shake it. Silence isn't a vacuum. It's an obvious presence that disturbs people who depend on turmoil to feel in control. It is an impregnable stronghold, a wall that will not collapse under pressure. When someone attempts to provoke, manipulate, or draw you into confrontation, your quiet is hard and immovable, like a mountain before the storm. They talk, they shout, they agitate the waves, trying to draw you into their stream. But you don't get sucked by their diversions. You don't spend your time defending something that doesn't require defending. Because, chosen one, your silence communicates a language they do not understand. It compels respect without making a demand. It changes the environment without using force and discloses the truth with a single word. Make no mistake, your quiet does not indicate weakness. It is the most outspoken expression of power. It's defiance clothed in tranquility. It marks the distinction between those who react and those who soar. There is strength in refusing to be persuaded and standing steady while others spend their energy attempting to shake you because they are unaware that the fight has already been decided before it ever begins. If your heart is overflowing with God's blessings, let that love radiate. Click the super thank you button and donate $20 or more to sow seeds of faith that will change countless lives. Your giving exemplifies His richness. Be a channel for His grace and watch His kingdom grow through you. See, the opponent relies on your response to justify their own conduct. They want to see you confused, defensive, and trying to justify yourself. They need you to enter their battleground. However, when you decline, you choose quiet over conflict, serenity over provocation, and knowledge over wasted words. That is when you win. That's when they're left with just their own frustration. A still force remains unassailable, immovable, like a tree planted near the river, like a lion that is unconcerned with sheep bleeding. Those who feed on strife will exhaust themselves and succumb under the weight of their own plans. Because you do not interact. They wanted battle, but you gave them silence. They craved your vitality, but you offered them nothing to cling on to. Silence is not just the lack of speech. It represents the presence of power. It is the ultimate test of self-control, judgment, and determining what demands your attention and what is not. And when you master that, when you learn to stand firm in the face of others flailing and crumbling, you will have fully realized your power. The chosen one. Your quiet is more than simply a barrier. It's a weapon, a force that disarms, that exposes, that shocks the earth underneath those who believed they had you under control. Because, while they are attempting to elicit a response, you are in the presence of something bigger. You stand in wisdom. You are standing on faith. You've won. Allow them to speak. Allow them to presume. Allow them to tire themselves out. You're already ahead. Withholding energy from futile interactions demonstrates calm dominance. It indicates a sense of one's value. A failure to put effort into diversions that are unworthy of attention. To respond is to give weight to insignificance. However, remaining still means declaring control over one's own place. Strength is not found in loudness or haste, but in the capacity to recognize when participation is pointless. Composure has an elegance to it, and strength does not need to be announced to be felt. The most powerful people do not desire recognition. Their presence alone alters the environment. Their quiet demonstrates restraint rather than acceptance. One of the rarest and most disciplined strengths. It enables for unobstructed view, revealing more than words could. Stillness sharpens vision, enabling reality to be observed accurately. The greatest realizations arise in silence, shrouded by the distraction of quick reaction. Silence is not the absence of presence, but rather an enhanced version of it. It carries weight and leaves a lasting impression on those who meet it. In a culture habituated to loudness, the unsaid frequently reverberates the loudest, transforming absence into a powerful force. In this calm, a deeper trust emerges. Silence is more than just withholding words. It entails giving up the urge to control outcomes. It is a proclamation that some wars are not intended to be waged with human hands. when a quarrel erupts. Restraint is an act of unwavering trust in the ability of justice to prevail without the use of force. The invisible forces of resolve act in ways that beyond immediate perception, proving that stillness does not imply inactivity. However, there is higher-order alignment. True power is not often found in the act of confronting, but rather in the wisdom to stand aside and allow the unknown to develop. What words cannot remain still? And know that I am God. Psalm 4610. Imagine an eagle flying far above the storm. The winds howl, the sky darkens, and the earth below is in chaos. However, the eagle does not battle the storm. It soars above it. It expands its wings. Catch the stream and let the wind to do the job. It does not spend energy fighting what is underneath it. This is what it means to walk in wisdom. That is what it means to believe in the power of quiet. A quiet mind is a barrier against disturbance, a fortress that cannot be rocked by the cacophony of the world. When you refuse to be drawn into dispute, when you keep your peace rather than squander it, you go to a greater level of strength, holding back words. It is not about fear. It's about concentration. It's about recognizing what demands your attention and what doesn't. Because, chosen one, you do not have to fight every war. Some battles are fought by forces far larger than you. Think of a river. The surface becomes calmer as the depth of the water increases. It doesn't hurry. It does not exert force. It moves on purpose. Carving through the mountains is effortless. That's the type of power quiet has. It does not flinch. It does not ask for recognition. However, it influences everything around it. That is the energy you carry when you refuse to respond. People will test you. They'll push. They will provoke. They will use their words as weapons. I'm hoping to shatter your composure. They want a response. They try to drag you into their mayhem because your silence reveals their lack of control. However, when you take a step back and stand firm without having to defend yourself, you compel them to confront themselves. Silence does not constitute capitulation. This is a mirror. It forces people confront their own doubts, resentment, and strife. And the chosen one is a burden they were never prepared to bear. The world teaches us that authority is shown by shouting, vengeance, and establishing a point. However, the true power is in knowing you don't have to prove anything to anybody. When pandemonium strikes, you do not respond when drama screams your name. You let it ring. Stillness does not indicate weakness. It suggests you're wise. Because wisdom is understanding that not every provocation warrants a reaction. Not all insults demand a response. Not every conflict is even worth mentioning. Silence is an expression of trust. It is understanding that invisible forces are at work, balancing the scales, clearing the route, and preparing for the next step. It is understanding that what is intended for you will come to you without using force, fight, or despair. Those who attempt to interrupt you will wear themselves out. They will hurl stones against an impenetrable castle. They will exhaust their own strength attempting to shake someone who cannot be moved. Maintain a strong quiet. Let your quietness make a statement. Let it be the thing that distinguishes you from others who want confrontation. You're not easily rattled. You're not easily persuaded. You do not subject yourself to fights that are beneath you. Just like the eagles fly above the storm and the river carves its way without opposition. Your power is in your presence, not your response. The chosen one. When you perfect the practice of stillness, when you learn to maintain your composure in the face of adversity, you will discover something profound. You never fought the war. The struggle was against you. And when you refused to participate, it had no option but to collapse in quiet. The doors open. The harsh words would have kept them shut. Answers arise in the gaps between action solutions, showing themselves. Previously, there was simply noise. The lack of a reaction permits clarity to take root, allowing modifications that cannot be imposed. It's the paradox of restraint. What seems to be inactivity is really the most deep type of movement. The silence alters reality in ways that go beyond immediate experience, setting hidden forces in action. Not every conflict requires a sword. Some are won by standing back and allowing time to determine the result. When words are restrained, other possibilities emerge, forming a route that argument would never carve. Stillness displays strength in ways that struggle never does. The impulse to counterattack lessens when confidence remains steadfast in the absence of a reply. The storm collapses on itself, leaving people seeking confrontation to deal with their own disarray. Their frustrations shift inwards. The uncertainty grows. Without opposition to legitimize them, they become caught in their own agony. The weight of their own acts starts to bear down on them, exposing realities they had intended to conceal. In that peaceful area, people are compelled to view themselves clearly. The lack of resistance exposes the defects they previously placed upon others. Provocation elicits contemplation rather than reaction, one that they are unprepared to confront. As a result, the struggle they wanted to wage on the outside became an inside conflict, consuming them in the same agony that they planned for someone else. The Lord will fight for you. You merely need to remain motionless. Exodus 1414. Consider a lion reclining in the shade of an aged tree. It does not follow every sound in the wind. It also doesn't spend energy on the restless organisms surrounding it. It moves when it wants, talks when required, and keeps complete control. The lion does not have to display its strength. The forest already understands the power of silence. This is the power of wisdom. A calm mind is a barrier against disturbance, a fortress against unwanted entanglements. It is the profound, persistent presence of someone who knows that genuine strength comes from restraint rather than response. When you keep your promise, you are not backing down. You're standing strong. You are allowing divine order to resolve the situation. Some issues are beyond your ability to resolve. Some fights are not yours to fight. And when you believe in it, when you refuse to allow minor distractions steal your attention, you identify yourself with something much larger. Imagine an oak tree in the midst of a storm. The winds wail. The rain pounded on its branches. However, it does not tremble. It does not withstand the storm. It withstands it. The weakened branches may fall. Shallow roots may wash away. But the tree endures. The deeper the roots, the more powerful the silence. That is the kind of power that silence has. It does not yield to momentary turmoil. It avoids unneeded confrontation. Instead, it stands and observes, allowing time to disclose the truth. There will always be some who want to lure you into their drama. They will agitate, manipulate, and try to stir something inside you because your tranquility disturbs them. They can't comprehend it. They are unable to control it, and so they attempt to disturb it. However, when you deny, when you stand firm without speaking, explaining, or interacting, you compel them to confront themselves. Your stillness mirrors their disarray, and at that moment, they are no longer fighting you. They are dealing with their own insecurities. The world celebrates loudness, but genuine power is discovered in silence. It is wise to understand that not everything demands a response, that not every challenge warrants your attention. People will expect you to reply, defend, and justify. But what happens if you don't? What happens if you decide to be like the lion under the tree? They watch with calm assurance, alone with the weight of their own acts. And it is a far greater weight than any words you could have spoken. Silence is not the same as surrender. It is a strategy. It is a proclamation that you will not be swayed by every passing breeze. It is the discipline of acknowledging that your energy is holy, your peace is precious, and you have picked your conflicts well. Similarly, the water carves through stone without using force. Similarly, the eagle glides effortlessly through the air. Your quiet will accomplish what arguments never could. So, stand steady. Let the storm roar. Allow the noise to build. But you will stay stable, unshaken, and undisturbed. Because people who are actually powerful do not need to demonstrate it. They merely remain silent. Doors that would have remained closed with force are now open. Answers arise in the gaps between action solutions, showing themselves. Previously, there was simply noise. In the lack of a reaction, clarity may take root, allowing for alterations that cannot be pushed. It's the paradox of restraint. What seems to be inactivity is really the most deep type of movement. The silence alters reality in ways that go beyond immediate experience, setting hidden forces in action. Not every conflict requires a sword. Some are won by standing back and allowing time to determine the result. When words are omitted, they provide place for unknown possibilities and shape a route that argument would never carve. Stillness displays strength in ways that struggle never does. The impulse to counterattack lessens when confidence remains steadfast in the absence of a reply. The storm collapses on itself, leaving people seeking confrontation to deal with their own disarray. Their frustrations shift inwards. Their doubt grows. Without opposition to legitimize them, they become caught in their own agony. The weight of their own acts starts to bear down on them, exposing realities they had intended to conceal. In that peaceful area, people are compelled to view themselves clearly. The lack of opposition, exposing the weaknesses they earlier placed upon others. Provocation elicits contemplation rather than reaction, one that they are unprepared to confront. As a result, the conflict they wanted to wage outside of themselves becomes a war inside themselves, devouring them in the same upheaval they intended for someone else. Stillness is not an activity. This is an intentional decision. It creates room for observation, deep thinking, and reacting with wisdom rather than reaction. It cultivates patience, a virtue that improves one's capacity to traverse life without reacting too quickly. The most profound thoughts arise in silence, when clarity may appear. Not every situation demands a quick answer. Not every circumstance requires involvement via quiet. There is a chance to listen inside, revise objectives, and proceed with accuracy rather than impulsivity. True power lies not in hurry, but in knowing when to halt and when to speak. And sometimes quiet has more effect. However, quiet does not imply separation from life. It is not about avoiding, but about understanding where to focus your efforts. When uttered with meaning, words have weight. Nevertheless, when silence is used properly, it communicates in a language far deeper. It is the skill of conserving strength and directing concentration to what is genuinely important. Restraint does not mean withholding for the sake of withdrawing. It is about ensuring that every uttered word has a meaning. Quietness in the face of unwanted conflict is not passiveness. It is the preservation of energy that might be utilized for production, expansion, or progress toward a bigger goal. Silence has been a treasured friend for those who recognize its power. Those who mastered it seldom wasted words on trivia. Instead, they used their presence to convey more effectively than words could. They understood that knowledge flourishes in environments where commotion does not drown out the calm. Answers appear, realizations emerge, and distractions disappear. It is here that the difference between what is genuinely precious and what is ephemeral is obvious. Stillness shows what should be retained and what should be let go of. Boundaries are established not simply with words, but also by refusing to participate in behavior that destroys the equilibrium. Silence is a proclamation, a clear stand against anything that threatens to disrupt tranquility. It is a protection, evidence that the mind and soul will not be misled by disorder. It reminds us that not every war is worth waging. Not every provocation merits recognition. This curtain of stillness is not just intended for the outer world. It's also a commitment to oneself, a promise to safeguard energy and to prioritize inner serenity above outward distractions. Allow quiet to serve as both a protective and disruptive force. It clears the way, redirects energy, and determines the route of action. Not a single word was said. Choose when to interact, when to move away, and when quiet is enough. Words are powerful, but silence, when used with purpose, has an impact much beyond what can be spoken. Restraint does not mean a lack of activity. It is an assertion of control. Holding back remarks when prompted does not constitute surrender. It is a purposeful decision that has a larger effect than any reply. Strength is not in the desire to react, but in the capacity to stay unaffected. In the face of confrontation, lack of response does not imply lack of power. It embodies self-discipline and demonstrates assurance without seeking approval via words. This unwavering quiet speaks louder than any argument. It states that external pressures have no effect, that peace is unbreakable, and that diversions will not influence the direction of conduct. Silence is both a protective barrier and a force that unsettles, exposing realities that words can only conceal. Stillness is not a retreat. When there is a clash, an invisible power comes into play. Stepping back is not avoidance, but rather an acknowledgement that not every disruption warrants involvement. The decision to keep silent transfers the burden of accountability. It focuses attention on the initiator, revealing their own motives without intervention. Resolution may not always need involvement. Many fights resolve themselves when left alone. Silence is an expression of faith, acknowledging that certain events will develop as they should. Absence of response is not a loss if no force is required. It is a method that enables what is required to come to the forefront while maintaining the emphasis on what is actually important. Composure is a language of its own. It conveys resilience, foresight, and the idea that strength is judged not by the loudness of one's voice, but by the consistency of one's presence. Holding back when provoked does not indicate restraint. It represents wisdom. The capacity to know when to participate and when to stay motionless is a talent honed through experience. It is simple to respond, but choosing quiet when the situation asks for it requires expertise. Every pause, every reluctance to engage in unneeded strife, redirects energy towards something better. Words influence perception, while silence defines reality, allowing for clarity, direction, and alignment with a purpose bigger than the present instant. Allow the lack of noise to be a proclamation of inner assurance. Allow it to carry the weight of clarity, unshakable concentration, and an unbreakable feeling of tranquility. When the world pulls in all directions, silence is a constant, a grounding force that provides room for development, vision, and change. The discipline of quiet, rather than the clamor of response, is where power lies. The biggest transformations occur unobserved.